Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time, a CADSource family production. In this episode, we discuss LinkedIn, why not to sleep on Twitter, and the old guard. This is a Q&A freestyle episode, which is at the core of what we do, helping you build and protect your business. In this episode, we get into the questions from our audience, including our clients and the business owners we chat with on a consistent basis, and you, our listeners. We hope the perspectives we discuss help drive new opportunities for your business. This episode is slightly different as you will only hear me speak. That's because we want to get right into the ways you can improve your social media and business presence. On that note, let's get right into it. So in this podcast, we want to do a little bit different and go more into specific ways that you can use certain platforms for your business. And instead of me having a guest on here, kind of keep it simple, keep it short, take the questions that we've received from our clients, our audience, people that have listened to this podcast, and how to best utilize the different tools that are out there. Just recently, we've gotten some great questions and some great feedback from people in the sense of training. Business owners, entrepreneurs coming to us and saying, really need training on these different tools that we're talking about. It doesn't apply to everybody, but I think we can all learn a little bit from it. I've seen experienced and newer people to these platforms ask these questions. So, we're going to get started with it. We're going to focus on the 5 areas we mentioned before. The first one is the LinkedIn profile. With your LinkedIn profile, the thing we want to look at is the actual first thing that most people see besides your name and your image, and that is your actual job title. But it's not necessarily your job title, it's what you do. And I think people need to understand that when you say that you are the SVP at this company, people really don't know what that means. In some senses, yes, they might. But what is it that you do and how can you help someone out? And I think that's the thing that we have to get across. You could be the president or the owner or the whatever, but what is it that you do? Do you help business owners? Do you help people? Do you help families? And when you do help them, what do you do to help them out? It doesn't have to be very descriptive because, of course, it's still going to lead to more questions. And I think that's the thing we want people to get after is we understand that when you say what it is that you do, someone might have a follow-up question, but that's great because it's a conversation starter. But when it's like you're the SVP of XYZ company or the president of XYZ company, to many people that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean your company's not any good. It just means that really don't understand what that can do for someone. So when they're doing searches or they see your name pop up on their LinkedIn feed, they can get a better understanding of who you are. To take that one step further, it goes into what do you post on LinkedIn? And this is the second thing I want to talk about. People have a hard time, they've come to us and say, well, what do I actually post on LinkedIn? You have content, you have this, you have that, but you're trying to keep a central theme going. And I think the best thing you can do is post stuff that is related to what your message was in your profile as to what you do. And if everything falls in line there, it makes a lot more sense as people come across your LinkedIn profile to say, oh, I get it. This person does this, this is how he helps people, and the content that he's posting or that she's posting is all related to that. So get this common theme that I talk about a lot on this podcast, for example, is all these entrepreneurs that we're talking to have this common theme with their interests, with their passions, with what they do in business and how they help people. And I think if you do the same exact thing on your LinkedIn profile, now it really starts making sense because that LinkedIn profile that you've built out and the things that you talk about, you might talk about them slightly different in a different platform, say Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, but really at the end of the day, it is a very similar platform. It's a very similar message that you're getting across and you get that common theme. So when someone sees you in these different settings or networks or even out in the real world or on the phone or in an email, they're getting that same vibe from you and they really start to understand, I really see how this person can help me out and I want to talk to him more about those types of things. So remember, going back to the LinkedIn profile, the first thing we talked about is truly put out there what it is that you do. It's going to be open-ended, as I said, but that should be the focus of it and not really the title and the actual company that you work for, although there could be times where that could be appropriate, but most of the time it should be really what it is you do. And just for an example, like I help business owners with content marketing and insurance. Now it's a little bit long a little long-winded. So my LinkedIn profile says, I help business owners. What does that mean? Great question. And then we can get into this because we do content marketing, we do insurance, and we like to help business owners, entrepreneurs. Obviously, it's what we do on this podcast. So that rings true to people, and people understand it. It's very simple, it's very easy to understand. It might lead to more questions, but that's great because that's a conversation starter. So that would be the first thing I would say, is really dive down into what is at the essence of what you do on a very simple level. That's what you should post. And then any content that is related to that is what you're going to actually put out on LinkedIn, and then carry that message across all the different social platforms. One of the areas I first got started in social media was Twitter. There's something about Twitter when I came across it that I just loved. I liked it better than I liked Facebook at the time. Twitter was some place where I could get news, I could get information, I could meet new people, I could find people with similar interests, I could make connections. Ultimately, I started starting to get opportunities from Twitter. I've received clients because of Twitter, not on Twitter exactly, but the conversation, the networking, the relationship started because of Twitter. And then Twitter took somewhat of a hit. It became very popular, overpopulated, and then people just posting content. And then it became very polarizing because they're talking about these topics that people take one side or the other on, and it gets heated, right? And there's a lot of negativity that's out there, and so it kind of took a back seat for a while. And as Instagram and LinkedIn and some of these other apps or networks started to come to be, Twitter took a back seat. And I'm here to say right now, do not sleep on Twitter as a platform, as a network that you can use. Now, you definitely can post your content, you can post links out, you can post images on Twitter, and that's good. And we certainly do that. I do that because, but do it in a sense of like sharing information that you think might help somebody else out. But going back further, when you start on Twitter, first of all, seek out information that you think could help you out, that you could learn from, and then you could help other people. But really, what you need to do is build an audience. You need to build an audience of similar opinions, similar interests, similar industries, those types of things, where you can learn and where you can also teach. And I think if you do that, you'll start just building an audience very naturally. Don't buy out followers on Twitter. Don't just reach to grab as many followers as you can get by, one thing I can't stand, go off a little bit of a tangent, is when someone follows you and then they follow, obviously not just you, but they follow a lot of people, and then they unfollow you. And you can see this when you go on to, there's some Crowdfire is an app, for example. It costs like $4 and you can add your Twitter account to it, and you can see who's unfollowed you. And you'll notice, this is very common, a person will follow you, and then a couple weeks later they'll unfollow you, and when you go to the Crowdfire app, you'll see that they are following 0 people. So all they're doing is following 500 people at a time, let a couple weeks go by, and then they unfollow all those same 500 people. And then not everybody's going to unfollow them back, so they might gain, let's say, 350 followers just out of that, and they think that's the way to do it. So I think that's a very bad thing to do. But really what you want to do is engage with people with similar interests. For example, I'm a huge Ohio State fan, so I follow a lot of people that are Ohio State fans, but I'm truly interested in their opinions and what they're thinking, and maybe they have updates from me, or maybe they're an insider for Ohio State football. Same thing with the Buffalo Bills, same thing with people living in Charlotte, same people with traveling, or people in or an entrepreneur in the marketing business or the insurance industry. Just things along those lines. You start interacting and following these people, you'll start building an audience. And then you can take that and then you can share your information, you can share your links. But more than anything else on Twitter, what I like is you can connect with these people, meaning you can actually have engaging conversations. You can chime in at any point in time and offer feedback. Not, hey, I want to sell you something, or I want you to buy something from me. It's more along the lines of having a true engaging conversation with somebody and then just being natural about it, not looking to sell anything at all. And this goes back to the earlier point about creating a LinkedIn profile. If you have a message in your Twitter profile and a link to your podcast, to your website, to whatever it is that you want to share, well, now it's very natural for someone to go there, research about you, click on the link, check it out, and say, hey, I really like this person. I would like to talk to them more, and maybe they message you back. And so also your profile, your messaging is very simple, and maybe now I can go find you on LinkedIn. So I love cross going cross network, meaning I find you on Twitter, now I go to LinkedIn and we can connect there. Maybe the conversation's a little bit different on LinkedIn, or vice versa. I find you on LinkedIn, now I see you on Twitter. I definitely think less people maybe are going over to Twitter than used to be in some ways, but I think there's really good conversation to be had. You can reach a certain kind of audience that you kind of find surprising. Alan Major, who was the coach at UNC Charlotte, assistant coach at Ohio State, assistant coach at Xavier, we originally met on Twitter because he made some great posts that I thought was interesting, made a comment to him, then we connected over on LinkedIn, then we had a phone conversation, multiple phone conversations, then he started doing guest blogging for us. He's very busy right now because he's in the college basketball world. There's a lot of stuff going on with college basketball, but again, that conversation started on Twitter. And we had great conversations with each other, and I believe that we'll be connected for a very long time. So do not sleep on Twitter. Make sure your profile, just like in your LinkedIn profile, has a common theme to it that's more related to Twitter than it is to LinkedIn, because they're different platforms. And then have engaging conversations. Seek out finding out about other people and what they're talking about, and then truly go have a nice back and forth with them. Not everyone's going to do it, but you'll be surprised. Read a book called Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink is the author of it, and with Leif Babin, and it's an incredible book. It's about leadership the Navy SEAL way. But anyway, someone else had made a post about a book that he wrote for kids. I had no idea about this book until I saw this tweet, and I saw that Jocko had responded back to him, and I simply responded back to Jocko, first of all, thanking him for the book that I love, that I'm going to get the book that he's written for kids and let my kids read it, and then also thanking him for his service. And then Jocko responds back to me, very simple stuff, but it's like, for someone like that, he's now getting new engagement and new followers to buy his books or listen to his podcast than he otherwise wouldn't have gotten. I get good feedback from someone like that, and there's just a lot of good things that could happen. It's just doing things the right way, as we always talk about on here. So the moral of that story is, do not sleep on Twitter. You know how much I love audio. We talk about audio all the time with podcasting, Audible. We're actually creating Audible style blogs where we have a voiceover for our blogs, which is just a different way to do it. I'm not saying tons of people are going to listen, but I do know people that would absolutely rather listen than read, and that's fine. And so we can put that on YouTube, and YouTube's a great place to then go and search things out. And if you come across something entrepreneur sports related, you might come across one of our Audible style blogs. But the thing is, audio is great because you can do multiple things at the same time. We've talked about that a lot. We have an article about why we're getting so involved with audio, not only because it's a great thing for others to listen to. I enjoy it myself. And when I was building this business 5 years ago, before that, audio started to become, for me, besides I've always listened to music, it's became something that was very important to me, because I was trying to do so many things at the same time that I needed to multitask, but like, let's say, go for a walk and still learn while I go for a walk and exercise, and that was listening to a podcast. And now to a point where I can listen to a podcast at 1.5 or 2 times speed, or listen to a book at the same rate. And it's amazing if you can listen to something that takes an hour and get it done in 30 minutes or 45 minutes, you're saving time. And so audio to me is huge, but it's hard, right? So the questions that we're getting from our clients and from business owners and just people we connect with, and people like our audience, is how do you create audio in a way that's easy, and right, because it's hard to put the podcast together. And we're not saying everyone should go start a podcast. If you can, great, but there's a lot that goes into it. Trust me, we have John Priori who's here, and he's the one editing and putting things together. And editing, we do like to keep a raw version of our podcast. We think it's just a very real way to be. The very edited ones were done by like the big media companies. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just different. And I think people want to see some raw footage. They want to hear me, fumbling around and making mistakes, because we're real people. We're not trying to be something that we're not. Audio is important, right? You have to have good audio. But we're not saying everyone should go start a podcast. But what we're saying is you can put small pieces of audio bits out there, share it on social media, share it on your website, share it with people through email. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. And I think it's important to do it, because I think voice has something about it which brings tone and inflection and all these different things that's going on that I think you miss out on with a blog post. Now, I'll say this. I still believe starting with a blog post is really a smart thing to do, because your blog posts become the beginning of your scripts for your what you want to talk about. Not necessarily scripts, but like the layout, the foundation, the summary of what you want to talk about on a podcast or a video or anything. And when you're given a presentation, it can become that. If you write a book, so there's a lot of different places you can go with it. But audio is the same way, because here's what's cool. If you create a piece of audio, let's say a 1-minute clip, you can take that and you can do a lot of different things with it. Just like if you create an hour of footage, you can break that up into small pieces and turn it into an audio. You can also turn it into a piece of video, meaning there's a program called Wave, W-A-V-V-E, and you can take multiple minutes of clips and turn it into a video style. So it'll be like an image, and you'll see this on our Instagram pages and our Facebook pages and our website. And it would have the audio wave going within that picture. So it is a picture, but it's also like moving. This is live, so it's like a video, and people like that. You know, people want to go through Instagram and listen to these audio clips. They're getting more and more popular. Anchor is another app that's been around for a while, and it's becoming more of a podcast platform. And they have different ways where you can share, you easily make audio. You don't even need a microphone. I mean, we use a microphone with all the different tools, but I mean, Anchor, you can do that too, but you can also just bring your phone out and talk into your phone, and that becomes the audio, and then you can share that all the different platforms and then create more audio things from that. So the point is, when you create audio, and it's not just audio, if even it's a video, you can take pieces of those things and create micro content. So you create the big piece of content, the big audio podcast, and then turn that into multiple audio snippets. And again, these are just things that we're doing in our business. So when business owners, entrepreneurs come to us and ask us how should they get involved in audio, that's the way to do it. I'd probably say create some stuff on Anchor, because it's really easy, and then use that to then share across the different platforms. And if you're really trying to get bigger and create a podcast, then I would get a lot of the different things that you need. But it's not just the things you need people, because if you're going to create a podcast and do it by yourself, it would take a long time. A lot of people do it, and if they can do it and have that ability, and that's big part of their business, absolutely, then I would go for it. But bottom line is, audio is huge. There's many different ways to get involved. I wouldn't try to go at it to think like the only way to do it is to start creating 30 or 1 hour episode podcasts. That's a lot to do. I mean, I would definitely say it's a lot to do, but there's other ways to get started with audio. If nothing else, just listen, because listen to this podcast, listen to all the other podcasts, so many other podcasts that are out there, and see if it's for you. Maybe it's not. I mean, maybe it's not for everybody, and that's something else to remember. Just because so many people are saying you got to get in audio, you got to get in a voice, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should get in a video, maybe you should get in a blog, maybe you should get in none of it. But there's a lot of opportunities out there for audio. We're going to continue to do this, and we're going to continue to talk to our clients about it. If nothing else, here's an opportunity. If you're interested in being a podcast, we love interviewing entrepreneurs. What we're doing a lot of is doing the podcast interviews. So say it's like an hour segment. What we would do then is take snippets from your podcast episode, and we would share it, and you can have it, and you can share it. So you don't even have to create the audio. You can have someone else interview you. They create the audio, and they hand that off to you. So kind of get everything that you wanted, and get it 2 birds with 1 stone. Hopefully that makes sense. Definitely get involved in audio in some way. If nothing else, just listening to it. This is something not necessarily related to social media, but it's more along the lines of maybe networking and acquiring new clients, keeping existing clients. Something I like to call, and not that I call it this, because this has been around for a long time, but it's the old guard. And we talk a lot about this because we talk about disruption in the marketing world. We talk about it in the insurance world. And there's definitely the old guard that exists. And I think in many senses that means, a business that's been around for a long time, has a certain way of doing things, has long-term relationships. And I think that's great. And I think they should have that. And I think if you have long-term relationships and you've been in business for a long time, you're obviously doing something right. But I do think oftentimes we run into companies that, because they've been around for a long time, because they've done it this way, that's the way that they're going to continue to do that. And I think with the rate of change that we have going on in so many different businesses right now, and if it's not happening in different businesses, it's going to be happening, talking about disruption, that it's, that's something that's real. Like, we've seen it. We've seen companies struggle or go out of business or have to change everything that they do at the last second before they did go out of business. And, I think if a lot of clients of a business that's considered, let's say, an old guard, they work with that company because they've been working with them for 20 years. And they don't really think of other ways to do business because they have such a long-term relationship, and that's great. But what if that business that they were working with didn't really evolve like they should have evolved, and maybe there's someone out there doing it better? And so you really have to think about, don't just be the old guard because you're the old guard. Because what happens too is as you go out and acquire new clients and you tell the story as to the reason we're so successful is we have all these long-term relationships. But don't get me wrong, that's really important to prove out that you have these clients that have been with you for so long. That's very valuable. But these companies aren't just going to sign up with someone because you have these long relationships. Maybe they're doing business with you because they don't know any better and they haven't really researched it. So it's definitely something to consider. With all the different things that are going on as far as disruption is concerned, to not just get so caught up in just assuming you're going to get business or keep business because they've always done business with you, or for the new client coming in the scene because you've done business with these other groups for so long. It's no doubt an attribute to be proud of and something to consider, but you really need to think about the different ways of acquiring new clients and keeping clients, because they're going to be looking more and more as let's say the millennials get older and they start researching, they start looking at your website and they start looking at your social media and they start seeing how savvy you are in those different areas. And if these businesses don't keep up with that, or if their types of business aren't the type of business that seems to be evolving with the different changes in industry, there's a chance that they might not want to get involved with that, because they see, if I get involved with that type of business, the disruption might come and then I'm gonna have to make another change. So really I think if you are an old guard company, and we hear about, companies are coming to talk to us quite a bit. They're like, man, I'm really running into some problems because we're having a hard time getting on social media. We're having a hard time conversing with people on LinkedIn. We're just posting things out there that we think that they would want, and they're not really kind of engaging with it. And our existing clients are maybe starting to think about going somewhere else because all of a sudden they're starting to think, maybe there are other options out there. And companies are coming to them. So something to think about when it comes to being an old guard. And it also something to think about if you're looking to work with companies, to not always just assume that just because they've been doing it this way for this long with these clients, that's the place to go. So it's our thought for today on being an old guard and working with old guards as it is. One of the main questions we get on the content marketing side is what to even talk about, what type of content to even create. And there's no doubt that's a tough question. It's a tough thing to consider in business. I think there's two sides of it. There's the informational side and there's more the creative side. Informational is like if you're an attorney, you're going to talk about the different types of trusts and wills and the things to think about, and what happens if you get divorced, or what happens if you need to do estate planning, and you can write about that. And that's good stuff, don't get me wrong. And that's good for SEO for your website. So if someone's doing a search for estate planning in Charlotte, they might come across your website. So I think that stuff is good, but that's not to me the stuff that's really going to captivate people. I think it's more of like, what interests you? What applies to that? What else can you bring to the table? And it's tough, but I would say as you go through the day and you have thoughts, which you do every day, and you have clients and you have experiences, start thinking through that and documenting it, and just put the pen to paper. That's all you're trying to do. It might not be pen to paper. It might be pulling out your phone and doing a voice memo. And even if you're not going to create content with that right away, what you're doing is you're building a library of drafts, if you will, that you can take that and do something with it down the road. So even if you don't do it today, you could have that audio clip, and eventually you can share that with your editor down the road. So if you have an editor and you've posted this thing to your voice memos, you could just send that to the editor or to the group that you're working with, and they can turn that into a blog post. Or they might come up with ideas for you to do an audio clip or to create videos from it. But that's the way I think to go about creating content, is sometimes to not overthink it and to just document what you have going on in your day and think through it. And when you have these thoughts like I'm having right now, there's going to be someone out there that's going to be interested in it, is my guess, especially if you are a leader in your industry, if you're a leader in your business. The other way to do it is really just to have someone, and this is not us pitching what we do, but we like talking to business owners. And when we talk to business owners, I love the stories that they have, why they're doing what they're doing, why, what's different, what's unique about it. And then somehow what we like to do is pull those things out of them and then write about it. or interview them on a podcast or do those different types of things, because now they don't have to do it. All they had to do was tell a story, and they're telling stories all day long. They're talking to clients, they're giving examples, and they're having a great time doing it. And then if a group like us could come in there and take that, and we put the pen to paper, or the group that you're working with puts the pen to paper and helps you create those ideas. They're your ideas, they're your stories. All this group is doing is just taking it and putting it to something that you can share with other people, because I promise you, people will find value in it. And we've seen clients of ours that wouldn't have time to write, they don't like writing, maybe they're not good writers, maybe they don't want to do podcasting, whatever that is, they all of a sudden become storytellers because they had an outlet for someone to then help them create that content. So I think there's, again, going back to the beginning, I think there's two ways to do it. One is just think about your thoughts that you have, document those thoughts, write them down, talk to your phone, talk to something, pull out a microphone, talk to that, and then share it with someone, let them do it. And again, you can do the informational side, which is like we talked about with the attorney example, or if you're a photographer and you want to teach photography, how to use certain types of cameras, where to find cameras, where to buy cameras, what are the best cameras, very informational stuff. But then there's also the creative side. What relates to it? What else can you talk about? What type of really big ideas do you have that could help someone out? That's the other way to do it. And then the kind of go hand in hand with that is to find a group that could help you, or an editor, someone that could help you out in creating that content based on your incredible thoughts that you do have. So creating content is definitely something that a lot of people are thinking about doing. More and more businesses are coming. We talked earlier about the old guard. I think as the old guard, it's not a negative word, I'm not saying it like that, but as the old guard is trying to evolve and do different things, I think, and they're creating a lot of content, they're asking these questions, how do I create content? I think those are the best ways that you can start creating content. It was absolutely awesome sharing these thoughts on social media and business. From the tactics to better utilize LinkedIn to the ways you can use Twitter, we hope your social media game gets even better. The perspectives from this episode are now perspectives you as a business owner and entrepreneur can use for yourself. And for your questions that help create this podcast, thank you. And for any entrepreneur with questions on marketing, feel free to send them our way, and we'd be happy to answer them on a future podcast, online or in person. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can contact me on Twitter at Eric_Kaz, or with the same name on Instagram, or you can find us at KazSource.com with links to us on the different social networks. Thank you for listening to our KazSource podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. Until next time, we're out of here. This podcast exists in large part because of Kasimov, the content marketing business inside KazSource Inc. Kasimov is excited to bring the content marketing services used at KazSource to you. Learn more by visiting kasimov.com. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It's a big deal to us. We hope you found value in it, and if you did, we would be incredibly grateful if you gave us a review on iTunes. Remember to subscribe to this podcast, and feel free to share it with anyone you know. More than anything, thank you again for listening. We appreciate it.